We're on Daf Nun Gimel Omid Aleph, and we're to Omar Mar, and we quoting the Brisa. The Brisa derives the requirement of adding Mala Oshan to the Ketores from the word Vakisa, and the Gemara asks, Kro LaKro, we already have a pasuk. We derived it from Kibananya Eroa al HaKaporos. Why do I need another proof from Vakisa Nan HaKtores, Omar of Yosef Hachikama? This is what the Brisa has in mind. Ainly, if I only had the pasuk Kianan, Kivanan Eroa al HaKaporos El, I would only derive that Oleh Mala Oshan. We take the leaf of this plant, of this vegetation called Mala Oshan, and that's the most effective part to create this pillar that goes up straight. But Ikar, but the shorish, the root of this vegetation, which is called Mala Oshan, Minayin, how do I know that that's also kshera for the plate to be added to the Ketores? Talmud Lomar, on that we need Vikisa, that the Vikisa in the Brisa is deriving that not only is the Ola of this Esev Mala Oshan, but even the Shorish, the root itself is Mala Oshan. Omalei Abai, Abai says to Rav Yosef Ibchatanya, I'm going to prove to you from the Brisa that the opposite is true, that the Ola is more effective in Mala Oshan. But as far as the shorish is concerned, the root, although it's less perhaps aesthetically beautiful, but nevertheless the root itself is more effective to create the oshan. So you're telling me I need another pasuk of Achisa to derive the conclusion that even the shoresh, which is called the ikar, is also effective in its kosher for the Ketores? I would say just the opposite. You should use a pasuk to determine that even the Ola of the Mala Oshan is effective. The Sanya we learned in the Brisa Nosan, but the Kohen puts into the Ketores the Ikar, which, as we said before, is the root, the Shorish of Mala Oshan. And the pillar of smoke is Metamer V'Ola Kimakel, and then he has fulfilled his requirement that the pillar of smoke is going up straight like a stick, and it reaches the ceiling of the Kodesh Kadoshim, once it reaches the top, and then it spreads around throughout the Kodesh Kadoshim, it reaches the walls on the sides of the Kodesh Kadoshim, then Memashmesh the Yorid B'Ksolim. Then the Derech Oshan comes down through the Ksolim, Ad Shenismalia Bais Oshan, until the entire Kodesh Kadoshim is full of the smoke of the Ketores, Shenemar V'Abayis Imoli Oshan. So it seems that once he added the Shoresh, then that's the Yofa, that's the best and most effective way of being Mala Oshan. It's better than the Olim, it's superior and more beneficial and successful than the Ola. Ella Omar Abaye Hochikam. Therefore, we have to go back to the Brisa and switch it around the other way. That from the pasuk Kibanane Royal Akaporis Ainli Ella Ikar. It's the Shoresh, because as we said before, the Shoresh is more effective to be Mala Oshan. And that's called Mala Oshan. Now you've created the Mala Oshan with the Ikar, the Shoresh. That's the most effective part. What about Ola? Can that also, the leaf also be considered Mala Oshan? How do I know such a thing? Lomar, V'chisa. That's what we're going to derive from the pasuk V'chisa Nana Ketores, that even the Ola is kosher l'Ketores. Now the Gemara is going to bring other alternative answers to the question why we need two psukim to derive Mala Oshan and Ketores. Or Sheshis Omar, the Bryce has in mind the Eli. I would only know from the first pasuk, Banane Royal Akporis, that he can put the Esav of the Mala Oshan Ella Shel Ol Moed Shema Midbar in the Ketores, in the Ol Moed, in the Mishkan, in the Midbar, when Hashem commands Moshe Rabbeinu to tell Aaron, who was serving as the Kohen Gadol in the Mishkan, in the Midbar, that's when we have the requirement to add the Mala'osh. But with regard to the Ketores in Shiloh, in the Mishkan in Shiloh, or the Ketores in Beis Olam, the Beis Hamikdash, Minayin, how do we know that we add the Mala'oshon to the concoction, to the Ketores? Talmud Lomar v'chisa. For that, I need the pasuk v'chisa. The Gemara right away asks, "Hi, this halacha that even in Mishkan Shiloh and Beis Hamikdash, they added to the Ketores a Mala'oshon. I could derive from a pasuk." I don't have to derive from the chisa. I derive from these two words, hashochen itam, which are totally redundant. And they're coming to teach me that just like we were commanded in the Avodas Yoma Kippurim, in the Olamot in the Midbar, so too we have to implement those same very avodos on Yom Kippurim anywhere where the Shekhinah is there, and that's called hashochen itam. Ella. So the Gemara now clarifies what Rav Sheshes had in mind. Hachikam. This is what the Brisa means according to Rav Sheshes. Ainly, if I only had the pasuk, ki be'anane ro'el kaporis, that requires that I add the malash and ella. That's only the Ketores that he's makter in the Kodesh Kadoshim on Yom Kippur. But Ketores shehiktav v'echazov b'chayimos hashana. What about the daily Haktores on the inner Mizbeach Hazav in the Heichal? That was required every day of the year. And how do we know that even on a daily basis during the balance of the year, he's got to required to add malash and Talmud Lomar v'chisa. And even though the word v'chisa is in the context of Yom Kippur, nevertheless, since it's redundant and it's repetition, therefore, imeno inyan, if it's not for Yom Kippurim, then we'll use it to establish the malash and the Ketores. Rav Ashi Omar, he has a different explanation as to why we need two psukim. Pasuk echad, one pasuk that teaches me mala oshon in the Ketores. That's the mitzvah. It's not critical, and the Ketores will be kosher even without, in the absence of mala oshon. But now that the Torah repeats itself, akiv, we have a principle that whenever the Torah tells me twice in Kodshim, it means that it is critical, it is indispensable, and therefore without the Mala Oshon, the Ketores is not a Ketores Kshera. He's going to have to replace it with a different Ketores, and that is a reflection of, as we said before, the general rule in Kodshim that anything that the Torah was Choser V'Shona, it's coming la'akiv to teach me that it's critical. Rav Amar, his answer to this problem is Chad la'onesh v'chad li'azhara. And the Gemara is going to quote a Brisa to support Ravid's contention that we need one pasuk to tell me that if he's maktir the Ketores absent Mala Oshan, then he will be punished with Misa B'dei Shamayim. And that's derived from the pasuk B'chisa Anan Ketores instead of V'lo Yamus. And we need the extra pasuk al Yoma b'chol Eitz al Kodesh Beis al Parochas Ki Ba'anani Roel al Kaporis L'Azhara to give an Azhara and a prohibition via al Yavo. That's a lashon of a lotaseh, and then we'll apply the second pasuk v'chisa to establish v'lo yavos the chi of misa b'dei shmayim, an event that he violates this prohibition. And now we bring a brisa to support Rav. Tanya Rabbi Eliezer, we have a Tana Rabbi Eliezer who basically derives from the pasuk v'chisa nanak toras v'lo yamus onesh. That means if someone is maktir without mala oshon, then the Torah says v'lo yamos, then he will die. And what it says in the pasuk Yov b'chol eis al kodesh v'beis laparochas ki ba'anane roel kaporos, that's an asara. That's giving me the yitzur and a lotas, because every onesh requires an azhara, ein onshim elin ke mazhirin. So we must have a lotus, and that we have from the pasuk al Yova. The Brisa continues. Yachal, I might think you shnei, both the azhara and the onesh, amurim kodem misas b'nei Aaron. They apply only in that period of time before the death of Nadav Avihu. And again, even though the psukim here that we're quoting were written after the death of Nadav Avihu, we're going to say that from the fact that HaKadosh Baruch Hu took their lives and punished them with death, it must be that they were maktir without mala oshin. With Lomar, therefore, the pasuk opens up the parsha of Achrimos with the word Achrei Mos Shnei Bnei Aaron, that at this point in time, the onesh was not given, was not transmitted. And therefore, since it's only after the death of the Bnei Aaron that this onesh was given, it cannot be that they died because of the sin of omitting Mala Oshan. And the Gemara is going to explain immediately what that sin was. Yochel yu shneim amurim achar misas Bnei Aaron. Is it possible that before the death of Nadav Avihu, there wasn't even an Isur to bring a Ketores that was chas, that was missing the Mala Oshan? Talmud lo v'kibanan eroa ala kaporos. This was before the Misa of Bnei Aaron. So how do we reconcile these two psukim? One pasuk teaches us that there was an Isur even before they died. The other pasuk says that it's only after they died. And the answer is as harakona misa the onish liachem, that the Isur lav, which is derived from kivanane roa, that was formulated and transmitted before the death of Bnei Aaron, and that's the azara. But the onesh, meaning what punishment will be meted out in event that somebody violates this azara, that was given liachar misa after the death of Bnei Aaron. The Gemara says, "My Talmuda." You're assuming that the pasuk Banan Eroa, which is the Azhara, was transmitted before the death of Bnei Aaron. From whence do you derive that conclusion? Amar Rav, Amar Kra, I'll tell you that the pasuk Banan Eroa, mashma, it sounds like, in its straightforward interpretation, Eroa ba'asid. In the future, I will reveal myself, my Shechina, Banana Ketores. And now, when it says Adayin lo nireh, that at the time of the death of Bnei Aaron, it was already nireh kvod Hashem, because it says that on that day, the very day of the dedication of the Mishkan, and the day of the death of Nadav Avihu, it says Vayetzu vayevarchu es ha'am, Vayera kvod Hashem el kol anan. And it's only after that it says the terrible tragedy, the event that took place, Vayikhu b'nei Aaron Nadav Avihu ish machtoso, etc. So therefore, it's for sure that the pasuk V'anane Roeh was given before the death of Bnei Aaron, and the Lo Yamus, that was said on the Torah without Mila Oshan. But that has nothing to do with the death of Bnei Aaron. So my time of Yonish, why were Bnei Aaron punished so severely? Kedesanya, we learned in the Brisa, Rabbi Eliezer Omer lo mesu Bnei Aaron ela al shahoru halacha b'fnei Rabban Moshe. They issued a ruling in halacha that you're allowed to bring the eish on the mizbech min ha'hejot, even though the eish came down from Shamayim, and they did it b'fnei Moshe Rabban. They didn't get permission from their Rebbe, from Moshe Rabbeinu, to issue this Horah, this psak. And again, even though their Horah was absolutely on the mark, but nevertheless they were punished because they didn't ask Rishus from Moshe to issue this Horah. And we have a principle called Hamora Alocha B'fnei Rabo Chayev Misa, Gemara in Eruvin. Even if the Horah is accurate. My Darush, the Gemara wants to know, what's your source for this conclusion that the Bnei Aaron issued this ruling that we should bring an eish min ha'hejot on the mizbeach, my Drush? And the Gemara quotes the pasuk, "V'nasnu Bnei Aaron hakohen eish al hamizbeach," which means afal pisha eish yores min hashamayim. Even though there was a great miracle and the fire came down from Shemaim, nevertheless, nasnu Bnei Aaron eish al mizbeach. They brought their own fire onto the Mizbeach. And that took place on the day of the dedication of the Mishkan, the Chanukas HaMishkan, and on that day it says, Vateitze Eish Milfnei Hashem, Vatochal Ala Mizbeach, and Mitzvah Lahavi Mina Hechad, even though it says Vateitze Eish Milfnei Hashem, the fire came down from the heavens, a miraculous supernatural fire, nevertheless, there's a mitzvah in addition to the fire from heaven to bring a fire Mina Hechad. On the Kohen HaMakriv should be guaranteeing the fire down here. Therefore, they brought the H, and they burnt the Torahs on the H, and they had paskined that you have to bring the H, and that was Moro Rav Fnei Rab. Mishnah says, Yotza ubolo derech knisasa, that when the Kohen Gadol exited from the Kodesh Kadoshim, he did it in a way exactly the way he went in, which means he walked backwards. Minan immediately, how do we know that the Kohen Gadol is required when he goes out of the Kodesh Kadoshim to walk backwards and retrace his steps? Kederach knisaso. Omer Reb Shmuel bar Nachmani, Omer Reb Yonas son of Akra, a pasuk in Divrei Yomi, Vayavo Shlomo labama asher begivon Yerushalayim lahakriv aleh. Shlomo came to a bama that was begivon Yerushalayim. What does that mean? Begivon Yerushalayim. Givon and Yerushalayim are two separate places, two locations. Chima inyan Givon Eitzel Yerushalayim. It sounds like there's a place called Givon Yerushalayim, one place. That's not true. Ella, but rather when it says Begivon Yerushalayim is Makish Yitzi Oso Megivon Yerushalayim, meaning going back into Yerushalayim. Yitzi Oso Megivon Bechazarosol Yerushalayim, when he goes out of Givon and he went back to Yerushalayim after he's makriv in a bama in Givon. And all that is to be equated with be also mi Yerushalayim leGivon. Or initially, he had come from Yerushalayim to Givon in order to be makriv on the bama, and now the Tanakh is describing that when he left Givon after being makriv on the bama, he retraced his steps. Ma bi also Yerushalayim leGivon. When he initially started his journey and he left Yerushalayim on his way to Givon, it was panav klape bama. There was a respect for the bama. Well, actually, he's on his way to the bama, so I don't have to introduce the element of respect. But in any event, but kach hiderech bi also, kach is af yitziaso mi Givon liYerushalayim. So when he's on his way from Yerushalayim to Givon, he's facing the direction of the bama in Givon, and that is derech biyasa. Now we make an equation to derech yitziaso mi Givon Yerushalayim. On his way back from Givon to Yerushalayim, panav klapi bama. Once again, just like in the initial trip on his way from Yerushalayim to Givon, he's turning towards the bama, which he's going to find in Givon. So too, on his way back from Givon, coming into Yerushalayim, he should also be facing part of Klape Bama Kiderech Biyasa. He's also facing the Bama. And how could he be facing the Bama if he's leaving the Bama? The answer is he's walking backwards. And this is Derech Kavod. But when the pasuk says Vayavo Shlomo Bama Asher Begivon, it's referring to Derech Halichaso. And then when it says Yerushalayim, it means Beshuva, on his way back from Givon to Yerushalayim. And this is exactly what went on in the Beis Hamikdash, Hakonim, Bavodasim, Levim, Bekuchanim, Yitzhovim, Amadam, in all the cases of those who came to either be Makriv Karbanos, or they were there for singing at the time of Akrovas and Karbanos, or they were there, the Anshe Mishmar, that was standing in the Azorah and representing Kol Yisrael during the time of the Karban Talmid. Kishehem Niftarim, when they leave the Heichal, Lo Yomachzirim Pem, they didn't turn their back towards the Heichal V'Holchim Kiderech HaJotos. Ella Mitzadadim, they turn their faces towards the Heichal V'Holchim, and they go back. And how much more so In the case of the Kohen Gadol, when he leaves the Kodesh Kodashim, he should certainly turn towards the Kodesh Kodashim and go backwards. And also this halacha of walking backwards when you're leaving applies to a Talmud Niftar Mirama, when a Talmud leaves the presence of his Rebbe, Shelo Yachzir Panav B'Yelech, he shouldn't turn around and his back will be facing his Rebbe. That's not their covet element. Sadei Panav, he's Machavin Sidei Panav Elav V'Holech, and now he's got his eyes fixed on the Rebbe as he's leaving. So he must be going backwards. And all this is based on the fact of the principle called Hishva HaKosev More Talmidei Chacham L'Mor Shamayim. The same awe and reverence that you have vis-a-vis Shamayim, so too you should have vis-a-vis your Rebbe. Your Rebbe is like the representative of Shamayim. And we'll illustrate this with the following testimony. V'chiha de Rabbi Lazar, Karavi Mifta Minei Rabbi Yochanan, when he left the presence of his Rebbe, Rabbi Yochanan, Rabbi Lazar, Karavi boy Rabbi Yochanan l'sguye, and when Rabbi Yochanan wanted to leave, Havi Gochin Koi. So again, Rabbi Yochanan is finished with the shir. It's time for him to leave. So first the Rebbe allows and expects the Talmud to take, to be nifrad from his Rebbe, right? To take leave of his Rebbe. And what did Rabbi Lazar do? Havi Gochin Koi Rabbi Lazar aduchte. Rabbi Lazar stood in his place and he bent down, he bowed. Ad Havi Michse Rabbi Yochanan walking backwards until he got to the point that Rabbi Yochanan could no longer see him. He was already past the corner there. He was Nela Mieno. The Kavadi boy, Rabbi Lazar Laskuye, and Rabbi Lazar wanted to leave. Havi Ka'azal Achore, he would walk backwards, and his face would be facing towards his Rebbe, Ad Michse Minei Rabbi Yochanan, until he got to the point where it would be impossible for Rabbi Yochanan to see him, and then he would turn himself around and walk in the normal way. Another story of the similar nature in Rava, Rav Yosef, when he left the presence of Rav Yosef, keep in mind, Rav Yosef was blind, couldn't see what Rav was doing or not doing, but nevertheless, Rav would still walk backwards with his face facing the face of his Rebbe Rav Yosef. And all this is Derek covered. Ad de menagfon kare umisvasan iskupasa de Bei Rav Yosef Tam. Unbelievable. The Gemara testifies that when Rava walked backwards, when he took leave from his Rebbe Rav Yosef, and this was the Derech Kavod, it got to the point where he would trip and fall, he would injure his feet, especially when he got to the entranceway into the houses, into the doorways of the base Rav Yosef, and his feet were full of blood from the injuries that he had incurred walking backwards. And I can tell you that even in our time, in contemporary time, there was, or Chivi is no longer alive, who was very motivated that the Talmidim, when they took leave, they should walk backwards. And on the top of Nun Gimel and Beis, Amru Leila Rav Yosef, after all, was blind, so he didn't know that Rav was doing this. And the notification got to Rav Yosef about his Rebbe, his Talmud Rava. Hachi Ovid Rava, this is what Rav is doing. Amalei, Rav Yosef then blessed Rava, and he said, Yeh Rava, the Sarum Reshach Akule Kracha. Yeh Rava means he ratzon, may be his will with a capital H. The Yoram Rochcha Al Kol Akrach, your head will be lifted, meaning you'll be on top as a leader of the entire metropolis here. In other words, you'll be the Rosh Hashiva of this entire of this city.